Hello, my name is Marjukka and I'm going to talk about avoiding the 8 wastes of lean API development with OpenAPI and APIops, especially APIops cycles. And I want to start with lean waste in API delivery. And if some of you don't know what lean is, a very short version of it is that it's a lean management is a management theory that started at Toyota way back, and it's all about optimizing the speed of delivery and reducing waste and making things more smooth and profitable and error-free. We all want faster and more budget-friendly APIs. Typically, our management at least wants that. If we don't, and I want you to just focus on the 8 wastes of lean management and how they show up typically in API delivery and how we can remove those wastes and make ourselves more productive. So first is rework. So we have invalid specs before gateway publishing. So for example, I had this issue way back when I was managing a retail company's API platform or trying to roll in one, and everybody's APIs were just unpublishable. Even if they looked really good and they were made by really great teams, there was a lot of stuff that they had to rework to actually get them in a shape that they could be published through a gateway. Waiting. We all know how it is to wait for feedback from customers, for consumers, from business, from security, from a lot of other places. What can we do to take away a lot of that waiting? Overproduction. We have extra endpoints we don't need. We have a lot of attributes in APIs that nobody knows how to use. We have massive amounts of documentation we don't actually need and is caused by actually a not so well designed API that is not easy to use. Handoffs, sorry, design disconnected from consumption. So we have, that's one handoff. So we have things where, for example, user interface designers have spent a lot of time creating great user interfaces, but when they hand them off to API and like backend developers, they notice a lot of things that are not either clear in the requirements or don't make sense from an API point of view. There are, of course, lots of other handoffs where things can get a little bit wasted. And inventory, dead or undocumented endpoints. So basically, you have an inventory, a warehouse full of APIs, but you don't know which ones are being used or how they are being used, who is using them, or maybe no one is using them, but you are afraid to get rid of them because maybe something is still done with them. Overprocessing, so heavy designs, unclear ownerships that require a lot of paper or a lot of like things that make decision making really cumbersome, and defects, of course, bugs, security configuration mismatches, really like things that are not working as they should per requirements, or things that are not even caught in the requirements but are still causing issues. Underused talent. Developers are, for example, rewriting specs instead of reusing APIs, or you have developers acting as business analysts or Scrum managers acting as POs because APIs just are not known by other people who should be knowing them, or you just don't have the right methodology in place. People don't know what is expected of them. So, okay, now we have identified a lot of problems, and maybe you have put your hand up at many of them. And at least in the audience, I could see that there were lots of people that were kind of saying, nodding their heads and saying, yes, this is a problem for us. So one of the solutions to some of these issues is to use OpenAPI. It's a really good standard, but we all use it a bit differently. And you have a lot of teams in the organization where you can actually see that if you don't give them very strict guidance, if you don't give them examples, you don't give them linting rules and so forth, they will all produce slightly different OpenAPIs. So OpenAPI is not synonymous for quality, and specs are not synonymous for a working API. You don't necessarily have an understandable, reusable, scalable API, even if you technically can validate your OpenAPI. So a lot of times you just need to do a little bit something else to just fix your APIs instead of simply using OpenAPI, although it's a really good start for REST APIs and of course async API and others for the other kinds of APIs. Now, here's an example. I'm going to show you a couple of different cases. So here we have a originally 6-month project where a team was developing APIs or an API, big API for an ecosystem of multiple consumers. And they started with like a very code-centric way of delivering the API. They basically generated the OpenAPI from the code, and they did all the coding, and they had a running API by the time that they hit the 5 months mark, and they were supposed to start consumer acceptance testing. Except at that point, it was really the first time when the consumers saw the API as an open API and as a kind of detailed specification. Before that, there had been a lot of emails and a lot of words written on different documents. But here they could actually start trying it out. And their first comment was that, okay, we have these requirements, we have a little bit of legacy system. For example, we can't use all these HTTP methods, and we can't use a lot of these endpoints. There are problems here. So actually this project that was supposed to be 6 months had to get 6 months more and more budget, because they had to almost recode the whole thing, or at least a lot of it. Now, what would have been a better way would have been, of course, to first make an open API design, validate that with consumers without actually coding anything, and then at that point get all the feedback from the to-be consumers, and then everybody would have been able to test and develop and validate in parallel, and that would have given everyone pretty much 5 months full of like development time to get sorted, and everybody would have known that, hey, we are in a pretty good path. This API is probably going to work for us, because they would have had the open APIs to start with. Now, that is one way of both using open API, but also removing a lot of those waste that we saw earlier from the development process. Now, another example, a US-based company was having an API, and they were their product management was doing a lot of good data gathering. So they knew that 50% of the developers who have registered for the API were able to make calls, but 50% never made any successful calls, and 25% of them contacted support with lots of pretty simple questions, but they didn't actually have stats on what the questions were, and they were a little bit hazy on what was actually going wrong. So what we identified then together with them was that the getting started docs were wrong. There were tiny nuances of problems there, and those problems would have been actually some things that would have been caught if they were to use OpenAPI, and they would have linked that OpenAPI with some specific and some very basic rules also. And they would have had OpenAPI examples that would have been runnable, testable, and they could have had their test automation cover those tests, and everything would have been fine. Right now, or at the starting point, they had basically a handmade getting started docs, and that's why a lot of people churned in the funnel that caused the problems. Now, one other case was that there was a 20-page PDF for what was a very simple use case actually, but because of some API design issues and kind of overloading, overprocessing, and a lot of other of these wastes, you actually had a pretty complex set of 3 APIs and a lot more documentation that would have actually been needed. And also that documentation wasn't very useful. So when the first partner, for example, had tried to use that API, they just couldn't, even though there was that 20-page PDF. We couldn't when our team tried it. It was impossible. So what was then the solution was to try to simplify things, try to really figure out what is it that their partners, their customers actually want to get done, and design that API in a way that was like less chatty, less cumbersome and overcomplicated to use, and therefore also needed less documentation. Basically, just having the OpenAPI there was enough. So all of these case examples were actually using API cycles method for getting rid of that waste and understanding what needs to be done. And I want you to kind of look at this last comparison. There were 3 teams, and they all had 3 months. And the first 2 were using, first one was using traditional architecture and diagrams, and had a lot of unanswered questions and performance concerns that came in quite late, security concerns, other kinds of concerns. The second one was using domain modeling, but not specifically in any structure of domains and methodology around it, except an understanding of how domain modeling might be used. And there was really no consensus on what domains were actually the correct domains. The output was quite, I would say, fragile, in a sense that it was a little bit of a bunch of misunderstood requirements and misunderstood domains, and also not understandable from a perspective of a non-architect who was not involved. It required a lot of explanations. Now, the third team was using API cycles and had the right stakeholders in. So in that 3 months of time, they were able to complete 8 customer journeys, identify 5 APIs from those, had clear reuse cases for architectural components across those APIs, and they had even improvement requests for the enabling teams for security and API management and so forth. Now, how is this possible? Because with API cycles method, which is an open method that anybody can use, there are quite a lot of canvases and checklists and exit and entry criteria to different stages of API design and development. And even a skeptic developer in this third team's case was able to actually become a power user of API cycles. So they were actually able to identify gaps in the requirements and in their understanding of the requirements quite early. They were able to apply the AI to accelerate the specification, especially in the beginning, but also kind of have more collaborative understanding with humans, with business and with security and with API platform team and so forth. And then there was a possibility to actually use all of this to create tests with AI help and even do some legacy code replacement with the help of AI. Once they got the requirements right, once they got the OpenAPI right and the interaction models around it. So they were able to actually scale, like one developer, one small team with one business owner. They were able to do quite a lot in 3 months compared to the other teams. Here's the kick-off of this methodology and these canvases. There's now even an open source tool called Canvas Creator, which is actually also a code library, which you can use for humans to use these canvases as a kind of mural-like experience, or just export the empty canvases as SVGs to a tool of your choice, or export the filled-in canvases and import them as JSON for your AI tools or for your code or for your version control. So it's really a kind of way to use human collaboration and technical advancements to your advantage to help you in the design flow of pretty good APIs that reduce these wastes and actually get you faster where you want to go. And these canvases are also localized. Right now they're available in German, English, French, Finnish. And you also can take this tool, this Canvas Creator tool with the UI, just port it to your local environment. Even in the website, it doesn't actually save anything into any database or anything. It runs in your browser. So what is API cycles? As a kind of recap, a method to align strategy with execution. Think of it as a shared language and roadmap for making great APIs, whether you are a developer, architect, or product owner, or even business. It has this metro map and metro stations that have this core API lifecycle described in the center circle of metro lines, but also it tells you how to involve and who to involve all the other parties and other teams, management, consumers, partners, into the design and into the life cycle of an API through these interconnected metro stations. So go and check the www.apicycles.com website, and if you have any questions or if you want help in applying the methodology, don't hesitate to contact me, our company Osaango, or for example, our German partners at CodeCentric. And there's even a Brazilian company that has put in this tool or these canvases into their tool. So in the website, in the partners section, you will find more information on those. And just kind of the idea is that this method is used all around the world. The map is showing where it's being used. So basically every continent, even if we haven't been there doing that. So please take all the lean waste out of your API development and design processes. Thank you. And connect with me in LinkedIn or otherwise.